Oh, actually, so before we start, I wanted to kind of mention something. We haven't done this with previous events, but for this one, I created an event on the co-curriculum portal, if anybody's heard of it. So basically, your co-curricular record is something you gain throughout the semester, and like it's basically your activity in the college. You can attend different events, and our club is also on that platform. We can post events from there. So I'm gonna basically send a link to the event on the platform if you want to check in, if anybody's interested to gain CCR, because if you're doing it through this session, and I'll also collect attendance today, you will be eligible for your co-curricular record. So I'm just gonna put this in the chat if anybody wants to go. And yeah, feel free to fill out the attendance. Once again, I'll probably give out the record to those who do. So it should be good. All right, it's 7:01. I'm gonna start. People join. They join. Let me share my screen. All right. And of course, I'm on the first slide. Cool. So today we're going to be talking about Flutter. I'm your host. I'm the GDSC Vice Lead. Alexander is also here. He's the GDSC lead. He'll be helping out if anything comes up, or if you have any question, please post them in the chat. Alexander will either bring them up or answer them. I've been doing Flutter for the last 2 years, and I think it's a pretty cool technology. I really like it, and I'd like to share it with you, and hopefully you like it as much. So today we're going to be talking about what is Flutter, like literally what do I mean when I say Flutter, and why do you need to use Flutter? Is it useful to you in any sense of your day-to-day life? How does it relate to other technologies that some of you might have heard? How to Flutter, that's probably going to be the biggest segment of the workshop. I'll be showing off some code and how to actually develop a small app using Flutter. And in the end, we'll have a Q&A if you have any questions. But yeah, also feel free to ask any questions throughout the session in the comments. Sorry, in the chat, and I'll answer them as we go. Cool. So I'm curious, how many technologies do people recognize here? If you see a symbol that you recognize, you can just like dump your answers in the chat. But I'm like curious how many, and maybe even like how many do you recognize out of these? What do we have, like 8 here? Well, Flutter, of course. 4, C4. Okay. 2, that's good. 6, nice. It's pretty good. Okay. These are all things you can build apps with, and these are pretty popular frameworks. Some of them more popular, some of them less popular. And you can build apps that would run on the web, on like multiple different platforms. I'm gonna just name them one by one if somebody's curious. So this is Blazor. It's a front-end framework from Microsoft. If you're building an ASP.NET application, you would use Blazor for your front-end. This is Ionic. I'm sure not many people heard of it, but It's also a cross-platform solution for building apps that would run on multiple different platforms like web and desktop, mobile, what have you. Vue.js, React, and Angular, the three that you probably heard if you did any like front-end development past jQuery. Those are the big three in like the front-end frameworks. We also have Xamarin. Xamarin is also from Microsoft. It's a solution actually pretty similar to Flutter, where you can build apps both for Android and iOS using C#. And finally, Swift, or Swift UI. You basically, this is just for iOS development. You build native iOS apps with Swift. I mean, I'm sure I didn't include like a bunch of those that are pretty popular, but I thought Flutter kind of would fit into this group, because with Flutter you can do pretty much the same things you can do with the other frameworks that you see on the slide. You can build apps for Android, iOS, web. Now it supports all desktop environments like macOS, Windows, Linux. So yeah, this is what Flutter is. It's another thing you can build apps with, and I'm going to talk about why you would use Flutter. So originally, like when I was first coming into building applications, I was introduced, and I'm sure like there was a path for some of you. It was like just raw HTML, CSS, JavaScript apps that like the websites that you build for the web, and those apps can actually run on a lot of platforms, right? Like you have browsers in your mobile devices, your computers, you can run those apps. The issue is that they are not native, so they're not standalone applications you can download from the App Store, the Google Play. You need a browser, you need a third-party application that would support those. So here where like Swift and like Kotlin and Java comes in. Yeah, I know I put languages together with frameworks, I'm sorry, but like Android development is done with Kotlin or Java, and iOS development is primarily done in Swift or Swift UI. And that's how you basically support all the platforms. Like you would develop one code base for just the iOS native application, one code base for Android, and then you would also maybe have a site or something. And that's how a lot of people do it. But then the question is like, okay, if you have three separate code bases for three different platforms, how do you update them? So let's say I want to add a button to like a login screen or something. I'll need to make three separate commits to three different repositories, right? I'll need to change the Swift repository. I'll need to change the front-end code. I'll need to change, the web code, the Android code. And this comes like you're doing double the amount of work or triple the amount of work that you need to. And that's where Flutter comes in. So Flutter replaces all of that for you. You write a single code base for all the platforms, and I'm actually going to be showing this today. You can modify, if you're adding a button, you're adding a button to your iOS device, to your Android phone, what have you. And yeah, I'll be showing that the Flutter app is actually, it builds on my Linux machine in the Android emulator that I'll be running, and also on the web. So it's like pretty cool when you see it. So Flutter comes with Dart as the language. Like generally speaking, also Flutter is a good tool for people that haven't done previous programming, because you're going into this fresh, and it's like it's different from other frameworks. I'll just say that. it has its own language it's written in. It has its own way of structuring components that you won't see in like React or other front-end frameworks. And it's just like generally nice for people that are just coming into front-end. Having said that, it's also good if you have some prior experience, because Flutter and Dart work well together, and like the Dart is actually the business logic. You'll be writing it in the Dart language. Flutter is just the framework where everything happens. It provides some widgets, which I'll explain what those are later. But yeah, this is what you'll be writing your application in. I got a question. I don't know if you were. I'll just read it. In general, I figure Flutter is a better way than Apache Cordova. Is that right? Apache Cordova, it's not a solution for like cross-platform development. I know that Cordova is pretty old and it is still used. I think you would write applications if you like know JavaScript. You would like write your website, and then through Cordova you can compile them to your native code. And it's a fair solution, but Flutter is just a newer, cooler way, I think. A cooler approach and a much cleaner one. It's just a different ecosystem. You need to try both to really understand what is better. In my opinion, Flutter is better, obviously, but I would advise you just like try both. Common beginner's question: Flutter versus React. I'm actually, well, it depends on what you're building. So if you're building a Android or iOS app, I would say Flutter, because you could use React Native to do that. But React works very well if you have like your social media kind of apps that run on the web, or you have like CRUD applications that run on the web. Like React is pretty much dominant there, but it also comes with a lot of overhead. Difficult one, depends on the situation. Okay, I'll take the last question and then I'll move forward. Have you used this in work environments or as a personal practice? So two major projects that I've built with Flutter were, one was for a startup that we were doing for Conestoga. By the way, Conestoga has an incubator. If anybody's interested, I can send you a link later. But we were part of, actually I'm wearing their hoodie. That's the Entrepreneurship Collective. We were kind of running a project there for about a year, I think. And we were building a Flutter app there. And the other one is an app I'm building right now. It's kind of a financial app, but I'm building it on my own just as a hobby project. So I wouldn't say like I have professional experience with Flutter, but I haven't worked in a company that does Flutter. But I've been doing some apps on my own. Yeah, that's pretty much it. All right, I'm gonna continue. If you have any questions, paste them in the chat. I'll take a pause and answer them as well. I was talking about Dart. Flutter uses Dart as a language. So what is Dart? Dart is like if TypeScript and C# had a baby, that would be Dart. Like TypeScript is, if somebody don't know what it is, it's like JavaScript, but it's a superset of JavaScript where you have types. So obviously JavaScript doesn't have like strong types, but TypeScript kind of brings the type components into the game. And C#, I'm sure everybody's heard of. So it's kind of cool to see those two work together, especially because like both TypeScript and C# were built by same people, like they both managed by Microsoft. Now like comes in Dart that is done by Google, but it's basically, I'll show some code examples. It's basically like pretty similar to both languages. So yeah, let's actually have a look. So I'm I know this is like, might seem like a lot of code, but this is a simple, like iterate over a list of objects kind of thing. So left-hand side is Dart and right-hand side is your TypeScript. And I thought this was pretty similar, like especially, obviously the class, like you can see that the class declaration is done a bit differently. You don't have your overrides in TypeScript. The constructor is done a bit better in TypeScript, I think, like the shorthand looks much nicer. But things like interpolation is similar, especially listing is very, like these square brackets for lists is a very JavaScript kind of thing, and for loops as well. So, I mean, this is your basic like figure squiggly bracket language, if you may. I think this looks pretty similar. And I was like, okay, I'm gonna compare Dart to TypeScript, but then I gotta compare it to C# as well. And I was like, this looks even more similar. Especially like I didn't even need to change the main function a lot. Like you can see that it's basically the same types. The lists are done a bit differently in C#, but like the way you create your instances of your classes, once again, interpolation is somewhat similar. So you can see that like, if you know C# or JavaScript or TypeScript, you would be fine with Dart, is the point I'm trying to make. So it's a new language. It's a learning curve if you're coming into this environment. But I would say that if you have decent experience with C# or TypeScript or JavaScript, you'll be completely fine. You have all the same functionality in both languages. Yeah, and this is actually like all high level. I'm gonna be like talking about Flutter. From now on, I'll be showing like actual codes, how to build an app. Today we'll be building like just a simple to-do app. I just want to show off some building blocks and what like building an app from scratch looks like with Flutter. You'll see that in action, I guess. All right. So here I have, I was preparing this the day before, but let's start with a new app and see how it goes. So I'm in my code directory. So Flutter comes in with like, I don't know if anybody tried to set it up from like the event description, but it's not a very easy process. You'll need to have, actually depends on what you want to run your app on. If you want to support like desktop and web, you don't really need anything, but if you want to run and test your app on an Android device, you'll need like Android Studio and things like that. A thing I found pretty good with the Flutter CLI, with the command line experience, was that there's Flutter Doctor. So Flutter Doctor allows you to see what is wrong with your system and what you can do and what you can run. So you can see that all of these points are like checkboxes of what do you have set up on your system? Can you run Flutter? Can you test things running Flutter? So you can see that I have a stable channel of Flutter 2.5.1. Some issues with Android toolchain, which I'm still battling. I think my Android setup is just weird. So Flutter detected that I have a Chrome browser, so I can develop for web. I have a Linux toolchain, and I can develop Linux apps. I have Android Studio installed, VS Code for development, and I actually have some emulators that I'll be using. So yeah, this is pretty useful when you when you just start installing Flutter. This is a good thing to do, and the docs will tell you to run Flutter docs pretty frequently. So let's scaffold a new application. We'll do Flutter create, and then GDSC to do app. So that's just the name of the app that I'm going to create, and it's going to put a bunch of files into this folder, and I should be able to go to the folder, and I'm just going to open VS Code in here. All right. So a lot of things happening. You don't start with like a blank thing. Unfortunately, I don't know what people prefer, but you already start with like a pretty decent scaffold of working application. So what are all of these files? I'm not going to be talking about all of them, just going to touch base on the important ones. And if you have any questions, I'll talk about anything else. So pub spec, if anybody done front-end development in like web setting, that's your package JSON. This is where all of your dependency is going to be defined. We already have like some dev dependencies. Flutter comes in with its own package manager called pub, and it has a lot of community support, a lot of packages. I'll actually show the website a bit later. But here you would like depend on other third-party packages, and you can see that we have like Cupertino icons as a package, and things like that. So you can download fonts, you can download like assets and your images, static images into your application. This is like the entry point. Sorry, not entry point, but like just the definition of what your app looks like. Defines the SDK you could be running on. Sorry, the SDK you could be using for Flutter, version of your application, things like that. So pass-vec YAML, pass-vec lock is the like constant dependencies. Sure, like same as package lock, right? What does .yaml means? YAML is a file extension. It's similar to JSON, if you ever heard of that. So YAML stands for, I think it's like a recursive thing. YAML stands for YAML aimed markup language. I think it has like multiple definitions, but I'm going to type it out because it's fun. It's like this. I don't know. I felt that was kind of cool. So yeah, it's just a way of defining some configuration for your app. You can see that it has like tabular structure. You can nest objects inside each other, and you can read about it on the side. It's pretty similar to JSON, but a bit better. What here maps to the node modules? That's a good one. Node modules, so for people that don't know, it's a folder where all of your dependencies are stored, all of your packages are stored, the source code for those packages that's going to be used for your app. There is no real node modules as far as I know. All of your dependencies are installed globally and like being reinstalled when you run pub get. So that's similar to npm install, and it's just using like it's referencing some other external folder that is not included in the project. Yeah, which folder maps the installed packages? Some external folder that is not in the application. Like I cannot point to a folder in here. I think it's outside of the app. Yet another markup language is another definition. Thanks, Kevin. Cool. Okay, so what are the other folders in this project? These are configurations for different environments that your app will be running in. So Android has some definition, like if you ever created an Android project, you'll recognize these files. Like build Gradle, it defines like some configuration for Android. I honestly don't even know all the details of this file, to be honest. But you have, yeah, like just different configuration for how your app should be built for Android. Same goes for iOS. You have like your Xcode project, you can open an Xcode. Then Linux defines configuration for Linux, and so on. Web actually contains your build website that you can deploy. And sorry, not the not the build website, but like the core components of the website. So if you want to include some meta tags or things like that, you would do it in the index.html. What contains the build pieces of the app is the build folder, which we don't have right now because I haven't run the application yet, and I'll show that later. The main folder we'll be working from is the lib folder. This contains our Dart file, which defines the application for now. Pretty much all the folders you won't be touching for the most time. You will just focus on the lib folder. And I will go over what is already in here. This like a basic, if you Flutter create an app, it comes with a basic like counter example, which is kind of useful. I will go over it, but we'll be doing something else. There's also testing. So if you ever wanted to do TDD, or if you want to like create some tests for your application, there is a way to do it. Here's your like widget tests. Maybe we even do a separate workshop on testing because it's a whole different area of things you can do. So, okay, yeah, let's actually look into this main Dart file and see what this is. I'll be building the application while I explain it, so I can actually show the example because building takes some time. So the way you build it is in different, actually, I don't know how other editors work, but in VS Code, there is this. You install a Flutter extension. So Flutter comes in with, there's like Flutter and also Dart support as well. So this extension allows you to pick different devices and build for different platforms. So you should be in the main.dart file to be able to run the application. And then I can choose what do I want to run it on. And this is pretty awesome. Like I either can build for Chrome, for Linux, desktop, or for some like mobile emulators that I have. Yeah, I think I actually have one running in the background. I'll just bring it in. Make my screen a bit smaller so you can see. Cool. And I'll build it and let it run. And while it's running, I'm going to explain what is in this file. So there are actually two things in here. So there is the main function, which is the kind of entry point of your app. This is the entry point. This function is going to be run on the start of your application. And you can see that all it does is like it runs my app. My app is a class that extends the stateless widget. And this is a concept that you'll need to understand if you develop Flutter apps, that pretty much everything in Flutter is a widget. Be it like a card that you display, a button, maybe it's a page. A lot of things in Flutter are widgets. I'd say like 90%, if not more. And the app, the actual thing you render, is also a widget. So our app builds, this is the example that you get. You get a clicker counter app from the get-go. I'm going to kind of expand these areas, delete the comments that are already in here, and explain what's happening. So the app that you get, once again, it's a stateless widget. There are two kinds of widgets, stateless and stateful widgets, and I'll explain the difference a bit later. But for now, just you need to understand that everything is a widget. And what it does, it has a constructor where you could pass some properties into, like your, if you want to conditionally render something, and has the build method. So the build method defines what will be on the screen. And you can see here that we are building a material app widget that has some title, a theme defined for it. And it also defines which widget will be built by default. This is your routing, like the start of your routing system. So material app is the root for every Flutter application, pretty much. I'll demo this right now. This is pretty cool. Flutter has a feature called hot reload. You could change things like basically anything. I can change the primary color for my application to, like, I don't know, let's do green. And if I say it will hot reload automatically, and you can see that the changes are just like rendered pretty fast. And this is what I really like about Flutter, and especially like its integration with VS Code. You get hot reload on save without any like watchers or like bundlers or whatever you need to do on the front end or in the front end like web environment. You just get this for free, and it's pretty sick. This primary swatch just defines the primary color for our app, and like I can just like change the primary color for the app bar and the fab here. So let's dig in how this works, right? Like we've seen how the root of the application works. Let's see how it actually makes things happen. So my home page is also a widget, but now it's a stateful widget. So this stateful widget, what it means, it has state. It can like modify its state. It's not just presentational, it actually has changing components inside it, what I'm going to say. I'm going to explain what that means by just explaining how it works, and you'll see the difference between a stateful and a stateless widget. So yeah, a stateful widget consists of two classes. One is the stateful widget itself, and you need to define like the create state, the state of this of the widget, and that's what you that's what you get for the second class. So you can see that we're defining a state for my homepage widget, and I'm just going to get rid of some comments here so it's easier to explain. With the comments, it actually seems like a lot of code for the counter app, but you'll see that it's not that much. Cool. Yeah. So this is basically what you can see on the screen. So this looks, the state is very similar to our stateful, the stateless widget that we've seen at the root. It has it doesn't have a constructor, but it has a build method, and that's what important. So the build method defines what we'll see in the application itself. So what do we have here? We have a scaffold. The scaffold, all of the things that I'm going to be like highlighting out widgets, and they come by default from just the Flutter framework. Flutter framework comes with a lot of widgets built in for you to start developing. These are like, widgets could be compared to tags in HTML. Like you already, when you start writing HTML, you already have like your B tags, your li tags, like for lists, for different kind of things, right? So same with Flutter, it comes in with a lot of built-in things, and it's very easy to build something ground up if you need to. A scaffold is a thing that's going to be rendered on the screen is like it's basically a screen. So it's going to define your app bar, how things should be positioned. So you can see that it has an app bar, a body, a floating action button, which is this little guy here. And yeah, this is pretty self-explanatory. So I'm just going to go over what this widget title means. I'm going to take a question. So the app bar is an app bar widget, which you can pass a lot of things to it, actually. So whenever you want to, I'm going to be talking about VS Code, other editors, you can look up the shortcuts later on. But in VS Code, if you want to learn what properties an object has, you can say control space, press control space, and you'll see all the different properties that are available for you. So in an app bar, we have actions that we can define. Maybe I'll demo some of these properties. I have like elevation, how much elevation we can give. Maybe this is actually going to be obvious. So give it 10 elevation, you can see that it increased. If it give it 0 elevation, it's going to be like pretty much flat. So one of them is title. Title just defines the text that's going to be on the screen. It's not a string, it's another widget of text. That's because you can style it and change like your font size and what have you. And we're passing a widget title. So what is this widget title? Widget title is the way you pass props inside the widget, how you would define these attributes when you're going to be using your widget. So let's go back to our root and see how our stateful widget is being used. My home page gets passed a title. So how was I able to like define this property? Pretty easy, just in the constructor of the class. So here's my stateful widget, and here's the constructor for the widget. There's a lot of like shorthand syntax here and like syntactical sugar, but all of this means is like, hey, I'm gonna pass a key to you, which is similar to IDs in HTML, and I'm gonna pass like whatever I want, like these fields to be, right? So one of them will be title. I'm gonna call this super constructor, whatever, with the same parameters. And yeah, so I could have called this like whatever. I could have called this foo. I could have passed like an elevation that we've seen, right? So a pretty straightforward way of passing properties into our widgets. So the reason we're using widget.title is because this is a different class. It doesn't have access to this title thingy. And widgets is just something we have available on the state. So we can get props off of it. And yeah, that's how we render the title of this widget. It comes from where we define the widget itself. Okay, before I go into this, I'm gonna read this question. Does it inherently support native capabilities like camera, etc.? If not, where do you add relevant plugins? Are they listed in the same place for Android, iOS, and web? Great, amazing question. I love this. So Flutter comes in with support for a lot of like native APIs, and the majority of them comes with like third-party packages, although like majority of them are developed by Flutter. Let me look this up so I'm not just talking words. I'll actually show you something. So I'm on this website called pub.dev. This is your NPM for Flutter. It's a place where you can like get packages for different capabilities that you want. A good example is a file picker, because file picker is not something built in Flutter. And you can see that here's your file picker. It will invoke native file pickers for different platforms. So if I include this package in my application and I use it, you'll see that I can invoke Android file picker, iOS, Linux, whatever. I don't know if they actually have examples here. Actually, yeah, they do. Let's see if they actually like click the button. Yeah, so this is like invoking your file picker for iOS, I suppose. Then file picker for macOS. So hopefully that answers your question. Like there are different packages for different native APIs, camera included. You can include them. As I said, all the packages are referenced in your pubspec.yaml. You would just add a dependency in here, run pub.get, and you're good to go. All right. Okay, let's dig in what happens here, and I'm gonna start building the app because we don't have too much time. So the body of all of this is actually also pretty similar. We have a center widget. All the center widget does is it centers its children. Pretty straightforward, I guess. And then we have a column widget. So columns and rows are going to be your friends along the way for layouts. Any layout could be defined with columns and rows, and I think this is like pretty straightforward. You don't even think about this if you do like HTML development, because by default, all of your divs, if you nest them, they will be like defined in a column. But this is you'll have a sense of if anybody did like Flexbox or Grid in CSS. This is going to be pretty similar. You're just like grouping everything in columns. You're justifying your content. You're like centering different things. And I think this API is actually much better than CSS. So we define a column with some children, doesn't even matter what they are. And then we define a main axis alignment. What is a main axis alignment? So a column has, you would imagine a column to have like two axes. The first axis is like the y-axis, which is the main axis for the column, right? This is where all of your widgets are going to be laid out. And then the cross axis is the one that is like vertical to the main axis. And all of this is saying is like, lay out my children so they are in the center along the main axis. So along the main axis, which is the column, like the y-axis for the column, all of the children will be in the center. This center makes sure that we are like horizontally centered. And yeah, this is your like flexbox, right? I could define cross-axis alignment if I want to. So yeah, and we get like different, I'll maybe show some examples later on so it's more clear what this does, but just want to go through this. Children, we have two texts. One is just rendering this message, nothing weird here, and the other one is doing this. This is actually like string interpolation, but they could have done like counter to string as easily. And they're giving it a style, which makes this number seem larger than the text. And yeah, this is pretty much how the layout is built. Now, how do they make the state change? So on pressed of this floating action button that we have here, which is like similar to your on click in HTML, we call a function called increment counter. Increment counter is a private function. I can tell that by the underscore that it starts with. And increment counter is defined in the same class. So what it's going to do is going to say set state counter ++. Very easy. If anybody did React previously, set state is almost like the same in Flutter. So yeah, we start with a counter of 0. Every time we click the floating action button on pressed increment counter, set state counter ++. That's pretty straightforward. Okay. Any questions so far about how all of this works? If not, I'm going to start building the to-do app, and hopefully some of the concepts are going to be more clear. I'm actually going to throw this home page into a new file, also to show you kind of how you can structure your project. You don't need to do everything in one file, obviously, although you can. Actually known people that did that. So we'll create a home.dart, and I'll just move these two guys into my home page, into my home file. Straight away, you'll see that I moved everything in new file, and a bunch of things are shouting at me that something's wrong. It's basically saying that it's not defined, like it's not a class. But helpfully, I can just import it from one of the libraries. Actually, before I did that, like I did this pretty quickly, there are 3 main libraries available to you. Cupertino to use for iOS, Material to use for Android, and Widgets includes, I think it includes both of them. I usually just use Material because I build Material apps. And yeah, so now everything is pretty much the same. I complain because my homepage is not defined, but I can also import that, reference this file here. It adds this import. Cool. Let's build something interesting. Okay, I'm gonna get rid of this, everything in my body. I'm actually gonna get rid of that floating action button as well. I don't need increment counter or the counter state for that matter. So what we're going to be building is a to-do app. We can like add to-dos, check off to-dos, delete to-dos, things like that. We'll see how far I get, and I'll just show different ways of styling components and whatever. And if you want me to try something, put it in the chat. I'll address whatever you want. So let's try and do this. So we'll start with a column because I want to lay out my widgets in like a column. I want a column, like a row for each to-do item, I suppose. So I'll start with a column. And a column accepts a children parameter. So my children are going to be, what I'm thinking of is like an input and a list of to-do items. So for the input, we can use input fields, or I think it's input fields. Maybe it's text input. Pretty sure it's input fields. Okay, I actually don't remember this. This is interesting. Edit. I'm gonna look this up. I'm gonna show the docs. So let's see. Flutter forms. Flutter has pretty good documentation as well. Like if you want to render anything, you'll be able to see how to do it. So let's see, they're building text form fields. That's what they use. Yeah, I guess we can use that. I actually think let's check if there are any other Flutter fields, because the name just slips my head for some reason. Input fields. It is a text field. Okay, I thought I had it, but apparently not. Cool, and the text field has a lot of stuff in it, which I'm gonna briefly go over. So it has like autofocus, autocorrect, things like that. What we're gonna be using is the on, like it has some events as well. It has on changed, on submitted. So on submitted, I'm going to be running some function. It doesn't really matter right now what that is. I mean, it needs to accept the value in order to work. but like here's my text field. And I think if I save it and rerun, we will already get a text field where I can type things. So pretty good there. Please go away. Thank you. So below the text field, I want to render a list of widgets. The way you do it is you could define a column, but actually maybe I do that first, and then I'll show how to go a step higher. So let's define some data that we'll display. So we'll define a list of strings for now. It's going to be my to-do items. It's going to be like wash the dishes, or like clean up, things like that. This straight away complaining that this could be, yeah, this should be a final field. Yeah, once again, IntelliSense is pretty good. It tells you all the things that you have done wrong in your life, and you can correct them. So I can render a column here, another column. And the children are going to be my to-do items, but I can just like pass the list in here because children is a list, is a widget list. It's not a string list. We need to convert each to-do item to a widget. So what I'm going to do is a pretty similar to JavaScript thing. I'll do to-do items.map, and I'll map each item to a text widget. And I'll just use item as text. So this is saying that iterable is not a list. We need to convert a map to this iterable to list. Let's see if this works. Here you go. Here's my initial pass on a list of to-do items. So obviously this is all static, it doesn't change, although I want to make this a bit prettier. So instead of doing a text on an item, I could do something called a list tile. And a list tile is much nicer. It has some other properties here. Aside from autofocus, it has like, looking for a title here. So I guess I'll construct it and I'll explain what it is later. So a title expects a widget that you'll render for the title. It's also going to be our text of item. And if I do even just simply this, you can see that this is much nicer. You have some spacing, and this is because this widget already defines some pre-built functionality for you. What is nice about this is that list style also comes with different params. For example, like leading icons or leading widgets. I can put an icon in front of each of my items pretty fast. So I want a leading accepts a widget. So once again, we can use something called an icon and just put, there are a lot of material icons that come for free here. I can use checkbox outline blank. New format, save, and we have checkboxes in front of our items. Pretty cool. All right, so you'll notice that I will keep like adding trailing commas after everything. This is just for the codes to flow nicer. VS Codes, and I think other editors as well, like they will lay out your widgets in a certain way that is more readable than if you make those trailing commas. All right, so let's actually add some functionality. Like whenever I press enter on the input field, I want the new item to show up, and I don't want this default stuff. Well, I guess I can keep the default stuff, but I want to, whenever I enter something in the input box, I want to add it to my piece of state. So in order to do this, we'll need to implement this onSubmitted function. So onSubmitted takes a value of the input, and you'll need to do something with it, right? So I'm going to create a function, a private function that says add to do item. So I can just like put it in my class. I'm going to say that it's going to return nothing. And add to do item will expect a string, right? That's what we get from the input. And all it's going to do is it's going to set state. And that's an important piece because we want to update our state and re-render our widget. I'm going to push the new value to our to-do items to-do items dot add value semicolon. Cool. Let's see if this works. You notice that the state doesn't re-render because I'm doing hot reload instead of a restart. So what hot reload does, and that's why I get all of this like nice reloads, it keeps the state of your app. Like if you're developing an application and you're developing a button on like a modal somewhere deep in your app, you don't want to keep restarting your app every time. You want to keep the state of what you achieved so far and just like modify that one button and only be concerned about that, right? So that's what this does. If you want to re-render the whole thing, I can press this button or like Control-Shift F5, I guess, and this will re-render everything. It will take a bit longer, but you can see that the field is now blank. So if I enter like new item and hit submit, you can see that it appears in here. Let's go over what happened again. So I entered the value and hit submit, which triggered this unsubmitted function. This unsubmitted function set the state of my widget to add the value, the new value to my to-do items, which is my state. And it re-renders, so it basically called the build function again. And what it did is it rendered this column again, which is my map, and it rendered all the widgets in my list. I think this is pretty cool, pretty easy as well. So let's make this a bit more interesting. I want each of my to-do items to have some state within them. I wanted them to be complete or incomplete because right now I can't really like do anything with this, right? So this is a bit trickier because now I cannot just handle the state of my to-do item in a simple string. I mean, I can, and I could do something smart here, but I'm just going to define a class for this, and we'll work with this class. So I'm going to define a class for to-do item. And what I want is a string of title and a Boolean of is complete. So if you define a class like this, this will complain because a nullable instant field title must be initialized. Just saying that like this is not nullable, it cannot be null, and you're apparently not giving me a value. Like this is wrong. So I'm going to define a constructor for my class. And this is basically saying like whenever you create a to-do item, you're required to pass a title, you're required to pass a complete. I actually don't want the complete to be required because I want it to be false by default. Because if you add a new to-do item, it's probably going to be false, like not complete. And cool, this is basically what defines my to-do item, pretty simple. Now what I can do is I can replace this generic string with to-do item because now I have a list of to-do items. These will complain because these are not just like simple strings. I can say that this is a to-do item that has a title of wash dishes. See how I didn't need to pass is complete because by default it's false. And although I can, right, like I could still, where I have the second to-do item, I can still like pass is complete of true. And this will override the state. So this will complain now because the list style, we are mapping over to-do items, and each item is now it's a do item, not a string. So I need to render it item.title instead. And in order to make this checkbox actually do something, I'm going to either render I'm going to either render the outline blank checkbox or the filled checkbox, depending on the state of the to-do item. So I can just do a simple ternary here and say item is complete. If it's complete, I want to render icons checkbox like that. And if it's not complete, I'm going to render the blank checkbox. Cool. Let's save and see how this looks. Oh, I guess we have another error. Right. When we add a to-do item and we call it with the text field, we also need to create a new to-do item. We cannot just like add a string. So to-do item, and we just need the title to be value. Ooh. So what happened here is I hit save. It tried to do a hot reload and save the previous state. And because our previous state was operating on strings and our new state is operating on to-do items, I got this issue that I have like some weird type mismatch, right? So if you're changing your actual data that is underlying your state, you need to restart the application. So now I restarted, everything's good, and we can see that the cleanup is done because I passed this complete to true. First one is not. So still cannot click these buttons. Let's fix that. Instead of just simply displaying an icon, I can display an icon button. And icon button has an icon that we can use for the icon button, but it also has I think it's on pressed. Yeah. So this will be another function that I'll define. Oh, actually, I'm going to do this differently. Excuse me. So I'm going to leave the icon. Because we are still want to keep the icon, I want to wrap the icon with an icon button. And here, like VS Code and other editors come with a cool like Flutter tools that you can use in your editor life. You just hit Control dot and wrap with different things. If there is some already defined widgets here, but if you want something else, you can just wrap with widget. And this is basically just puts my icon as a child of this widget. And the widget that I want to use is the icon button. It's not called child, it's actually called icon. So back to the onPressed, I want to call another function, which is, I guess, like toggle to do item. Pretty similar to add to do item. So I'm just going to copy this method. So toggle to do item will actually, we'll need to pass the to-do item we're toggling because otherwise this wouldn't make sense. So I'm going to say toggle to-do item with the item we're iterating over. Right, and our toggle to-do item should expect a to-do item. So just to explain what happened here, I would just wrap the call into arrow function because onPressed expects a function and not the result of this function. Anyway, this toggle to do item expects an item, and what the state change that will happen is just like the item is complete, it's going to flip. So we're going to say item is complete equals not item is complete. Save this and try it out. And now I can actually click these and my state changes because I'm doing set states on all these. And I can like click these pretty good and I can add new items. So this was like what, 70 lines of code, some of which are like brackets. We already end up with like a pretty functional and decent looking to do that. I want to take this one step further, and I think that's probably going to be one of the last things I do. If anybody wants me to try something else, I'll stay on and try that. Otherwise, I'll just like take general questions and talk about where to go from here. The last thing I want to do is I want to be able to delete these items. And I don't want to do like a boring way of creating a button and displaying a trash can, clicking on it and like making the items disappear. I actually want the swipes. Yeah, I want the swipes. I want to swipe left and like the item to disappear. So let's do that. In order to do that, I'll need to check, I'll need to wrap my list tile in another widget. And that widget is a dismissible. So a dismissible widget is something that will allow us to drag our items, and it needs an onDismiss function, which I'm going to leave blank for now. The dismiss function accepts a direction, and also you'll see that dismissible still complains because we need a key. It needs to know which, it needs to know how to differentiate the dismissibles between each other. So keys are similar to IDs in HTML, and we can just use the value key to make this like reference the actual instance of the item to make it unique. So if I save this, what I'm able to do is drag these, which is pretty cool. If I drag them out, they will disappear, but my state actually didn't change because I'm doing nothing on dismissed. So in order for our state to change, actually I might prove this by adding a new item. Well, actually, will get an error because now I have like some weirdness going on with my state. Anyway, we'll implement this onDismissed so our state functions correctly. And yeah, you can see that the dismissible widget is still part of the tree. Make sure to implement the onDismissed handler to immediately remove the dismissible widget from the application. So did some bad things there. So we need to make sure that doesn't happen. So onDismissed, we'll just call like from direction, I want to say remove to do item, and remove to do item. Be also similar to the existing functions. It's going to accept a to do item, and all it's going to do is it's going to say item to do items remove my item. It's just going to remove the item from the list. So now I'm going to save. I can still delete this, and I can add new values without errors. So that's because I'm now actually affecting the state, re-rendering everything. It doesn't get confused about the dismissed values and so on. Just quickly, I'm going to make this a bit prettier, and then I'm going to take some questions. So this is not kind of intuitive. Usually for like, if you ever did this in other apps, you would get like a red background showing that, and that's pretty simple to do. Dismissible has a background, I think. Yeah, so a background where you can define a container. A container is pretty similar to a div, and we can give this container a color of red. So now whenever I drag, I get a red color. I don't really like that I can drag in both directions. I would rather just simply drag to one direction, and I can easily fix that with drag with the direction property, which if I don't know what to pass, I can hover over and see that it expects a dismiss direction. So dismiss direction, and there are a lot of options here. So down and to start, blah, blah, blah. I just want start to end. This way I can drag it here, but I cannot drag it the other way. Okay, and maybe I want to display like a pretty bin there saying that we are actually deleting this item. So I'm rendering a container here. I can put something inside my container. I can say that the child of this is actually an icon. And we can put icon delete here. If I save this, you'll see that it's in the center, not really what I want. I want it moved to the left side. The simplest way I can think of is just wrapping this in a row and making that main axis alignment to main axis alignment start. So we're kind of like shifting that item to the start of the row. So now my bin is here. Now you can go further and add paddings, change colors, but I just wanted to show how easy it is to just like create something like this, and looks pretty interesting and easy to do that. All right, I think that's pretty much that's as far as I'm gonna go today. If you have questions of what I've done right now, or if you want me to try different things, maybe you can just like throw challenges at me if you want. I'll try and implement that. I have a question here as well. Is there any limitation to using Flutter? That's a broad question. I wonder what you mean exactly, but I guess from my experience, the main limitation was Flutter uses an engine to like draw widgets on the screen. Like it's basically, if you were gonna build a web application, it's gonna be a canvas with a lot of elements on it. The limitation that I found is that you need to, if you're using like built-in widgets, it's often that you want some like extra functionality in these widgets. For example, like maybe it's not enough, all of these properties are not enough for me, which happens pretty rarely, but still it's a possibility. And then you need to customize them. That might be a bit difficult, but as you learn more Flutter, you kind of start to understand how to write the code so it's use the framework and not like break the framework, right? So that's the main one, but otherwise it is pretty fast. It's pretty easy to implement. Deployment processes pretty good. Like you just basically take your, by the way, here's our build folder, which for now just contains the Kotlin app because I built for Androids, and you just distribute this. And that's pretty easy. Oh, this is an amazing question. I actually forgot to address this. If you add a bunch of items, will it scroll? No, it won't. And I'm gonna prove this. So let's hit the enter a bunch of times. Okay, this will be painful, I'm sorry. I guess you'll need to see me hit this 10 times because I want to prove it's not scrollable. I'm actually gonna see how it was like overflowing. It's a different issue, but we'll need to address that as well. So let's keep going. I want to show that it's not gonna scroll.
Could you just add like 10 default items that are hard coded in the?
If I would be smart, I would do that, but I'm almost at the end.
Oh, okay.
Okay, we're almost there. Okay, so I got an overflow and I cannot scroll through these, which is a major issue. So the reason for that was because I'm using column for it. I'm not using like an actual scrollable thing. So if I want these items to scroll instead of a column, I would use a list view. And then I think that might just work. Or I will get an issue, right? The reason I get this issue is probably because of the layout. So I added a list view that's going to try and take a lot of space, actually an endless amount of space in my column, in my parent column. And now Flutter is confused how to lay this out because you're asking about like an endless amount of space. Solution for that is to wrap the widget with a flexible widget. A flexible widget is like, the gist of it is like, I'm gonna ask my parents how much space I got. Okay, I have like, we already laid out this input, have this much space left. I'm gonna fit my children to this space so they don't overflow. Let's actually restart this. And I might follow your suggestion, Alexander, of rendering 10 items here. Oh, I think I got in like weird state right now. Okay, I'm gonna restart the whole thing. While I do that, I'll copy this. Just so we can see that actually scrolls. All right, what other questions do we have? Okay, Kevin found some Flutter limitations. That's useful if anybody wants to check out. Cool. Yeah, let's maybe refresh. I wonder. Okay, this is interesting. Actually, I'm not sure why this thing is cached. I think I added all of the items. Okay, I'm probably not going to debug this right now, but there might be some issue going on here. I'm actually going to try and play around with this. No, this does update the state, so. Yeah, for some reason the state is just cached. I don't know why it's not respecting my need to do items. Oh, here you go. Okay, so now we get a scroll thing, which is pretty cool. So yeah, if you want to scroll, use a list view. And if you want to avoid layout issues with endless heights, use a flexible. That's my take on it. Can you dynamically size widgets? What I assume you mean by that is changing the size depending on the prop. Actually, not sure what you mean by dynamically sizing widgets. Oh, for different screen sizes. This is a good one as well, because I'm actually going to run this app in web and show how it handles screen sizes for web. So I just clicked here, selected web, and if I hit F5, this now should be building for web. So it's attaching a Chrome device. You can see that we, like our build folder is changing. There are different, so if you've ever done CSS, there's like, as if like it's all a difficult technology, but if you've done CSS, there are rules that you can do different, depending on different screen sizes, right? Like you can check if your screen is a bit bigger, then make a row, a column, and things like that, right? You can do this here. There are other tools that do it, other kind of APIs, but this already like supports some screen sizes. Obviously, this is not ideal, and you can like change these if you want. But yeah, you could, for example, say something like, if my screen is smaller than like 400 px, then lay these as rows or something. I don't know what you would do. There is a way to do that. I don't know it from the top of my head, but it's doable. Just to show it off as well, like we are in a Chrome tab right now, I'm going to build a Linux app that runs somewhere to do that. So I can select Linux, hit F5, and this is building a Linux application. Actually, I know there is like, so building for desktop is in beta. It's not fully supported, especially for Linux. There might be like some errors popping out. I ran it in just a run mode, not a debug mode. Let's see what we'll get. While this is building, I'm gonna switch back to my slides. I'll find them. Just wanted to share some useful resources. If you want to learn Flutter from here, there's a link to the repo that contains whatever I was working on today, maybe a bit different version. But if you want to like contribute, experiment, just fork the repo and experiment on your own, feel free to do so. It's probably private right now. I'll make it public after I end the session. There are official docs that we've seen are like pretty nice. You have some good explanations of things with examples, and like they're actually interactive as well. There's a Codelab to build your first Flutter app, which I think Codelab is a pretty cool way to learn. And actually, they released a book recently, and if you're a book kind of person, you can read this for free. I think you can get access to Flutter Apprentice until like end of December or something. So yeah, I'll also actually paste a link to the presentation in the chat, so you have access to it.
Yeah, and also I have a couple of announcements after you finish, if you don't mind.
Yeah, for sure. Where's my Linux app, I wonder? Let's see. Here's my Linux app. Look, this is a very laggy, as you can see, because this is still in beta, and I don't know what's happening to my window, but this is a Linux window, a Linux application. You can distribute this on Snap or something. So yeah, I think this is pretty cool. Just how easy it is to get going. Like, in my opinion, just some like closing remarks before I give it to you, Alexander. Flutter is a cool tool for rapid development. Like, I'm still learning you can build enterprise applications with it, like pretty big applications. But where it shines is when you are at like a hackathon, or you're like, you need to build a proof of concept and you need to just like quickly do something. Flutter is like ideal for this, and you want to quickly build two apps that are supported on multiple platforms. That's like the ideal use case. Yeah, having said that, building real apps like with a backend, Flutter is integratable with Firebase, which I'm planning to do a workshop on as well. It's pretty good to go, and very good support. There was a second version of Flutter released in March, I think, this year, and they added a lot of new features. So there's a lot of support behind the framework, and I think there is a good future for it. Yeah, let me know if you want to cover other things in Flutter and create some more follow-up workshops. Once again, like, I'm always on Discord. If you want to interact with me, or you have any questions about the workshops, I'm always available. And I'll be doing another workshop on Firebase sometime soon, and hopefully you learned something today and I answered some of your questions. And yeah, Alexander, do you want to take it?
Sure. Yeah, thank you so much, Andrew. That was a great workshop. Thank you for the overview. I just pasted the links, a couple of links. So first, maybe I can send it again. So the first link is our GDSC social media. So this is just Google Docs where you will be able to find all our socials, including GitHub, including LinkedIn, including Instagram, YouTube, etc. So this event is recorded, so we will post it later on our YouTube channel. And also the second one and very exciting part, we are conducting a hackathon, essentially starting tomorrow, called Condor Hacks. And essentially this hackathon will be held during Student Success Week. So like we decided not to condense it only in one weekend, but we decided to give you like the full reading week. So you have more time to work on your project. And then on October 31st, we'll have a demo day where we'll invite some industry professionals, some guests who will help us evaluate your projects. And then at the end of the day, we will give out some prizes like Amazon gift cards or like something else, like gift cards and also Google Swag. So if you're interested, please RSVP, please log in. So this is the second thing, Condor Hacks. Yeah, you're also welcome to share this information with your friends. The only like requirement for the hackathon, you must be a current Conestoga College student, and you also can read some of other requirements on the page. Yeah, but tomorrow we will have like an intro call for the hackathon, so you will be able to ask all the questions you might have. So it will be tomorrow at 6 p.m. That's the official start of the hackathon. So everyone is welcome.
If you build a Flutter app, you get 10 bonus points from me.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're welcome to build anything and everything. And if you have any issues, please, like, if you have ideas, if you're looking for a teammate, if you want to team up with somebody, please engage and text us. We're always here to help. The Discord server is free to use. So
yeah, definitely. Yeah, and just please share this information with your peers so we get more engagement and like the event is more interesting. So yeah, that's it for me. Back
cool.
to you, Andrew.
Yeah, anybody else has any questions regarding the presentation of what we said here? Take some questions, and I think that's going to be it for me.
Actually, I have one question regarding the hackathon. Actually, means what kind of project like we have to create in the hackathon? Like, is it has to be complex or can it be simple? Or
it can be whatever you want. It could be a fun game.
So it can be like console based or like a web based or like a Windows based, like
whatever you want.
And do we have to like develop in the like we have to use Google technology like while developing it?
Google.
Again.
Yeah, like sorry, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry for interrupting, but I was going to say that like Google technologies will give you bonus points. So you can build with something else, but if you build something with Google tech, then you will get more points in the evaluation step on the demo day. So yeah, this is, yeah, but again, you can combine technologies as well. So it doesn't mean that you should build your project only with Google technologies, right? You can combine different technologies and just create your app.
Yeah, we're basically going to be grading like how well did you use the Google tech, if at all. Like if you build, I don't know, like ASP.NET application that uses Google Maps, but uses the Google Maps API in such a good way that we're impressed, you'll get all 10 marks or whatever we get for it.
Okay.
That's the gist.
So basically, actually, means I am like a C# user actually, and I mostly use .NET technology.
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah, that's cool.
So I have used like web APIs of the Google for map and all, but other than that, I haven't used actually.
Yeah, think about how to integrate some Google API. There are tons of Google APIs that you can use, like Google Vision. There are Google like text, speech, whatever. If you create an app that uses, or maybe just Google Cloud, host your web app on like Firebase, Firebase and like Firebase hosting, you'll get points. Like it's whatever. Make sure if you want to get points for that section, just make sure you integrate some Google technologies into your app and solve those challenges with Google Tech.
Also,
Okay,
just
sorry, actually, so we just have to create a project and we have to use a Google technology as much as we can, right? So the project can be anything, right?
Once again, Google Tech usage is just what, like 10 points or 15 points? I actually don't remember the grading, but it's a certain amount of points from your total grade. You could neglect that rule and like use whatever you want. It's up to you, but it's whatever you want to create, you're free to do so. We don't set any boundaries on you. I know it's going to be hard to grade, but we'll manage.
Yeah.
Okay, and just one last thing, like, miss, can I have like teammates from my batchmates? Like, means someone is not a member of GCA, means, Google Developer Club.
Are they Conestoga College students?
Yeah. My batchmates.
So, yeah, sure. They will just need to fill out one form. So yeah, the only like mandatory requirement, they need to be like the current Conestoga College students. And then if you go to the like hackathon event page, there is a form that they will need to fill out. Yeah, and that's it. Yeah, so if they're current Conestoga College students, that's good.
Yeah, sure. Thank you.
The only limitation with that is just like, if you win first place, then only club members and full-time Conestoga students will be able to receive prizes. That's it.
Yeah, actually means we are in the same batch actually, but he is not a member of a Google Developer Club actually. Encourage
him to join. He'll gain a lot, but it's not really a requirement. Just he needs to be a Conestoga.
Yeah, he's a Conestoga College student, and we are in the same class actually.
Cool.
Thank you.
Yeah, and also just a final note. If you are looking like for co-op soon, maybe for the next year, for the next semester, or like, again, that will be a great place to network because again, we will invite some other company representatives, so you can chat with them during your demos. And yeah,
sure. Actually, I'm looking forward to that. Thank you.
Yeah, cool. Perfect. So then, yeah, I didn't have anything else. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks everybody for listening. I had fun today.
Yeah, thank you for the session actually.
Thank you.
Thank you.
See you next time.